All right, we're moving on to our next story here. And this probably is the most controversial story of the evening. Pramila Jayapal had an interview recently with Dana Bash on CNN, obviously about Israel and Gaza, but in particular about the accusations of sexual violence towards Israeli hostages. Now, I'm going to go into this interview saying this because I've already watched this a couple of times. What Pramila tried to do here is she tried to talk about, the issues with the behavior on both sides, on the side of Hamas, on the side of the state of Israel. But apparently that is not what Dana wanted to hear. And you'll see in this interview, the moment she starts to call out the violence that has come from the state of Israel, Dana Bash has a problem with it. In fact, Pramila Jayapal has been smeared since this interview. So just be on the lookout for it, because I can imagine that AIPAC is probably going to get someone to challenge her next, because they don't like the fact that she said anything bad about the state of Israel at all. This is how far we've gone. Let's get into it.
With the collapse of the temporary truce between Israel and Hamas, here in the U.S., Democratic divisions over the direction of the war and Biden's support for Israel are once again on full display. Here with me now is House Progressive Caucus Chairwoman Pramila Jayapal. Thank you for coming. It's nice to see you in person. Let's start with where we are right now with the war. The White House says very clearly that Hamas is to blame for the collapse of this temporary truce for a few reasons. One is that they refused to release the remaining women, some of whom, sounds like most of whom are 20 to 30-year-old women. They're hostage inside Gaza. They also renewed the military attacks against Israel. You have repeatedly called for Israel to implement an indefinite ceasefire, but given what we have just seen with what I just described, is that realistic?
Well, let me pause there for a second. So she's bringing up the accusations, and this is coming from an article that Barry Rice shared as well, that there are women, some of the hostages that there's accusations that there was assault, right? I want to be careful how I talk about this on YouTube, but that there was assault. What I find to be pretty interesting is that we're just hearing about this now, right? I think whenever there are these types of allegations, I think there should be an investigation. Now, what I do want you to know, what Dana Bash is not going to tell you, is that the state of Israel does not want to allow an investigation. That seems strange to me. And it seems like to me what's actually happening is that this is an effort from mainstream media and other political, politicians as well, and other pundits to try to find a way to shift the narrative. So what's one way of doing that? They've done this before. They did it with Syria. They did it with Afghanistan. They did it with Iraq. You bring up the fact that there are women and the women are claiming that they have been assaulted. Again, we don't know if this is true or not. We don't know. But the fact that they're not even allowing an investigation, which the UN said there should be an investigation, that is very suspect. So listen to what Jayapal says.
That's what has to happen, and I do think it's realistic. I think what we saw is after, many weeks of saying we couldn't get to a ceasefire, that was not going to happen. We did have a temporary ceasefire, and what happened? We were able to see a significant number of hostages released. We were able to get humanitarian aid into Gaza, and I think the long-term plan for what happens is incredibly important. Now you've seen Vice President Harris made a very strong statement yesterday. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin also was very clear that if you engage in urban warfare in the way that Israel did in northern Gaza, what you will do is perhaps win a temporary victory or a reprieve, but you're not going to win the long-term strategic war. So the only way, Dana, to get through this is to make sure that we, first of all, do not have the kinds of casualties that we saw in northern Gaza. There's no way to do that with the kind of war that Israel is waging right now on Gaza.
Well, a couple of things. One is, you said it worked. Yes, there were hostages who were released, but it wasn't even an actual hard ceasefire. They were just trying to get another day, and Hamas wouldn't comply. So what makes you think that Hamas would comply with a longer term ceasefire?
Well, I think
Israel did not comply either. Dana Bash is leaving that out.
this is all about negotiation. Qatar has been incredibly helpful here. It's not clear to me from the reporting who was to blame for.
You don't believe the Biden administration, that Hamas?
Well, I just think it's
won't
very
release
complicated.
young women?
I think it's very, very complicated.
So you see what Dana Bash is doing? She's saying to Pramila Jayapal, you don't believe the Biden administration? So this is to throw Pramila Jayapal under the bus. Look, I got a lot of criticism for Pramila Jayapal. Again, I told you, I think she's that friend that says they're going to show up to fight. And then when you guys meet at 7 o'clock, Pramila Jayapal stays at home and you see her the next day in school. She'll say, oh, I forgot I had something else to do. You know, I feel like she is that type of politician. I also feel like I've heard from other people from within inside that DC bubble that Pramila Jayapal wants to be more vocal, but she's afraid. She's very much scared. If I was Pramila Jayapal, I wouldn't have even done this interview. By the way, they don't have to do that. Did you know that? These politicians, they don't have to do these interviews. Okay, so there's that. But the thing is, this is a way for Dana Bash to try to get Pramila Jayapal to admit that she does not believe or trust Joe Biden. So notice how she just kind of snuck that in. You don't believe the Biden administration?
It's not, we don't have all the information in front of us. We obviously can rely on some statements that are made, but I think that in these negotiations, everybody wants something. And I think Qatar has said that Hamas is still at the table. Israel should still be at the table. In fact, some of the Israeli hostages are saying that Israel should still be at the table because this is complex negotiation and it doesn't happen unless both sides are willing to come to some kind of an agreement. That's how we got the first 7 days.
That's a really important point about both sides being willing to come to an agreement, because regardless of what has happened last week, and let's just say there is a more permanent ceasefire, you are hearing from Hamas leaders over and over again that the brutal massacre of the 1,200 Israeli civilians was just the beginning, just a rehearsal, and that they want to continue to do it over and over again. So a ceasefire would keep that brutal terrorist regime in place in Gaza.
I don't think that's true. I think that what is true is that Hamas needs to be taken out. It is a terrorist organization.
How would you do that?
But I think the way to
look at what she's doing. Watch this. Let's go back just a little bit, right? Watch this.
Brutal massacre of the 1,200 Israeli civilians, which
that part right there. Have you guys noticed this? Whenever they talk about the Israeli deaths, notice it's a brutal massacre. But whenever you bring up the 12,000 Palestinians that have been killed, they never refer to that as brutal or a massacre, right? So there's obviously more Palestinians that have been killed compared to Israelis that have been killed. But again, it's about who do they value more. That's why the group that has less deaths is referred to as a brutal massacre compared to the 12,000 Palestinians that have been killed. They don't value the Palestinians the way that they value the Israelis. That in itself is a problem. But listen to what she says.
Just the beginning, just a rehearsal, and that they want to continue to do it over and over again. So a ceasefire would keep that brutal terrorist regime in place.
So she's saying that the ceasefire would actually, so now she's going against a ceasefire because she's saying that that would actually keep Hamas in place. That would keep that terrorist organization in place. I would argue, if I was Pramila Jayapal, here's how I would push back. I would argue through all of the fighting that's been happening, Hamas has not been taken out. Instead, civilians have been taken out, over 12,000 of them. That's how I would argue back against that. So the bombing and the attacks is not killing Hamas. You see the problem? So there's that. The other problem is when you talk about the brutality and when you talk about keeping some type of terrorist thing in place, you cannot leave out the fact that the state of Israel is still occupying and removing people from the West Bank. She don't want to talk about that. This is why, guys, they continue to go back to October 7th, because they only want you to focus on what happened that day. This is how they get around trying to explain what Israel has done to the Palestinian people. That's an important thing to pay attention to.
In Gaza.
I don't think that's true. I think that what is true is that Hamas needs to be taken out. It is a terrorist organization.
How would you do that?
But I think the way to do that, as many terrorism experts have said, is to create a durable and strong coalition of allies within the Middle East, with the United States, with Israel, to make sure that we have a long-term political solution, that there is an alternative to Hamas to lead in Gaza and to establish a state for Palestinians.
Why is she asking Pramila Jayapal how she would do that? Pramila Jayapal is not in charge of foreign affairs. You notice the slip up here? So she's doing that again on purpose. How would you do that? That's not the position that Pramila Jayapal is in. This is why I don't understand why this interview was even done with her. She should be asking Kamala Harris these questions. She should be asking Joe Biden these questions. She should be asking anyone that's in any position, the higher up ranking officials in, I would say, the defense. Anyone that's a higher up ranking official in defense, she should be asking them those questions. Why is she asking Lloyd Austin these questions? This is a setup. And I don't understand how Pramila Jayapal walked into this interview and didn't understand that this was a trap. Just like Star Wars, it's a trap.
This is, we have to condemn what Hamas did on October 7th. We cannot allow for 15,000 Palestinians to date to have been killed, 3/4 of whom are women and children, and say that that is going to help us in the long term.
Listen,
morally, Dana, but also strategically for Israel. The only way through this is to create a situation where there is a political solution that involves a Palestinian state and an Israeli state.
Notice how Dana continues to try to interrupt her when she starts to talk about both sides.
Really, what you're talking about could make sense. It's just unclear how you get from here to there. Who's going to get rid of Hamas if there's no continued war? And I think what you're relying on is the pressure from Arab states, and they haven't been willing to do that.
It's not.
So this is Dana Bash trying to come in for CNN, for mainstream media, and convince the American people and to change the narrative, to push them to believe that the war must continue in order to execute Hamas. As we have seen since October 7th, all of the fighting, all of the deaths is not executing Hamas. But this is on purpose, guys. This is CNN trying to find a way. Let's see if we can shift the narrative among the American people and get them to think a little bit differently about this. It's not working because people can see that the casualties that are actually happening is not Hamas, it's the Palestinian civilians. So she's here to keep the pro-war narrative.
Part of the reason they haven't been willing to do that is because we have been allowing Israel to literally indiscriminately bomb hospitals, violate international humanitarian law, and so we are creating
pre-October. Okay, even pre-October 7th.
Notice how she interrupts her anytime she says something critical about Israel. You see this?
To literally indiscriminately bomb hospitals, violate international humanitarian law, and so we are creating
even pre-October. Okay, even pre-October 7th. Can I just ask you one more thing about that? You have seen the information and intelligence that Hamas has used its own civilians. The death of civilians it's horrendous. But Hamas has used its own civilians as human shields. Those hospitals and so forth are places where Hamas keeps weapons and keeps its Hamas leadership, that they have their headquarters there.
So that's Dana Bash struggling there. Remember, that was already debunked on Mehdi Hassan's show on MSNBC when he actually had the interview with Netanyahu's prime advisor there. So remember that. Remember, he talked about the video that the IDF made, and he said this This paper that was on the wall was not actually names of people. That was actually just a calendar. Remember, they talked about the fact that that video, it obviously had been edited. So Dana Bash is reaching here. Let me see what else I can pull to get her to admit to we have to continue the war and that there shouldn't be a ceasefire. This is very, very desperate. This is CNN being very desperate, people. They are trying to really reach and grab all kinds of straws that they can. They're even repeating things that have already been debunked. I don't want you to talk about the fact that Israel violated war laws, Pramila. So let me talk about the fact how Hamas was using people as human shields.
Weapons and keeps its Hamas leadership, that they had their headquarters there.
Dana, international humanitarian law says that you cannot attack a hospital unless there are some circumstances. If rockets are fired from that hospital, that is one thing. But hospitals are protected. We have had refugee camps that are bombed. Right now, there are even the only pediatric hospital in Gaza is not operating. If we want to defeat terrorists, we have to abide by international humanitarian law. That is just my fundamental belief. And that at the end of the day, what we need is a lasting coalition that is not going to be formed if Israel continues to do what they are doing. And the United States cannot be backers of this kind of indiscriminate bombing. That is my firm belief. We should have conditions.
And you have to understand, too, this isn't the first time that Israel has attacked hospitals. They've actually done this before, even before October 7th. So my thing is people like Pramila Jayapal and other people should have been calling that out back then.
On military aid in the same way that we do for every other country.
I want to ask you about sexual violence.
Here we go.
It's kind of remarkable that this issue hasn't gotten enough attention globally. Widespread use of rape, brutal rape, sexual violence against Israeli women by Hamas. I've seen a lot of progressive women, generally speaking, they're quick to defend women's rights and speak out against using rape as a weapon of war, but downright silent on what we saw on October 7th and what might be happening inside Gaza right now to these hostages. Why is that?
Let me chime in here before Pramila speaks. So something I want to add in reference to this, again, Israel is not allowing for an investigation. The UN has called for an investigation. And two, where was this same concern, deep concern about this type of violence towards women from Dana Bash when you had other people who accused Democrat politicians of the same thing? Where was that same type of concern from Dana Bash when you had Palestinian women accusing IDF soldiers of the same type of violence? So again, once again, pay attention, people. They are telling you to your face that one group of people is better than the other. Where have we seen this before? Anytime something horrible happens to the Palestinian people, yeah, let's make an excuse. Human shields. But it's always the opposite when it happens to the Israeli people.
I mean, I don't know that that's true. I think we always talk about the impact of war on women in particular. In fact, I remember 20 years ago, I did a petition around the war in Iraq.
You said,
saying
have
that,
you talked about it since October
absolutely.
7th?
And I've condemned what Hamas has done. I've condemned
Specifically
all of
against
the
women?
actions. Absolutely. The rape, of course. But I think we have to remember that Israel is a democracy. That is why they are a strong ally of ours. And if they do not comply with international humanitarian law, they are bringing themselves to a place that makes it much more difficult strategically for them to be able to build the kinds of allies to keep public opinion with them. And frankly, morally, I think we cannot say that one war crime deserves another. That is not what international humanitarian law says.
Okay, with respect, I was just asking about the women, and you turned it back to Israel. I'm asking.
You see what's happening here? With respect, I was just asking you about the women and you turned it back to Israel. So again, Dana Bash does not want you to say that Israel is at fault for anything. She wants you to put all the blame on Hamas. Pramila Jayapal is pointing out, issues on both sides. And Dana Bash doesn't want her to do that. So now it's like, oh, Pramila Jayapal, you're really bad towards women. I was talking about the women and you turned it back around to this. You see this is one of the reasons why CNN's ratings are in the toilet. This is one of the reasons why. Who pays her? Who's she really working for? Who Dana really working for?
You about Hamas. In fact,
I already answered your question, Dana. I said it's horrific, and I think that rape is horrific, sexual assault is horrific. I think that it happens in war situations. Terrorist organizations like Hamas obviously are using these as tools. However, I think we have to be balanced about bringing in the outrages against Palestinians. 15,000 Palestinians have been killed in Israeli airstrikes, 3/4 of whom are women and children.
And it's horrible.
This is where Pramila messed up, because if I was Pramila Jayapal, I would have brought up the fact that, just to let you know, Dana, Palestinian women have also had those same accusations against IDF soldiers. That's what Pramila Jayapal should have hit back with. Not just the number of people that have been killed. We know that. Dana already knows that. She's prepared to push back against that and just say, oh, yeah, I know it's awful. But these women, how do you fight back with that? You fight back with that. Well, what about the Palestinian women who have these accusations against Israeli soldiers? That's how you fight back against that. Because what Dana is going to continue to do is she's going to find a way to make it look like you don't care about women, but in particular, you don't care about Israeli women. And that's what Dana is trying to do. So she's like, yeah, I know. And it's awful.
Airstrikes, 3/4 of whom are women and children.
And it's horrible, but you don't see Israeli soldiers raping.
Well, Dana, I think
that is false. So you see what's happening here? This is CNN. Hold on. Blatant lies, ladies and gentlemen. She is blatantly lying. Watch.
And it's horrible, but you don't see Israeli soldiers raping.
Well, Dana, I think we're not.
For her to sit there and just tell that lie. What if some of the Palestinian women who are prisoners, what have they said? The ones who have been released, what have they said happened to them when they were in prison? There's an entire documentary where there's a bunch of dudes that were part of the IDF. They're older now. They were part of the IDF, where they go on talking about what they did to the Palestinian women when they kicked them out of their homes. There's entire documentaries about this. This woman is bold-faced lying. There's been no investigation. But she wants you to believe, when it comes to the Israeli women, the Israeli people, she wants you to believe in the IDF. She wants you to take their word for it. But when it comes to the Palestinian people, they need to see proof. We need evidence. Who reported it? Where did the source come from? Again, they are proving to you once again that they value one group of people over another group of people.
I don't want this to be the hierarchy of oppressions. Right. I think 15,000 people have been killed.
It shouldn't be, which is horrible.
And 2.2 million Palestinians live in a 140 square mile area, which is about the size of Las Vegas, with a population that is 4 times that of Las Vegas. And 1.8 million Palestinians right now are displaced. They are living in shelters. They are being told to move to South Gaza, then South Gaza is being bombed. They're being told to move to North Gaza. There are no homes left. The vast majority of infrastructure has been destroyed. This is not the way that we are going to beat terrorism, whether it's Hamas or some future iteration of Hamas.
On that note, I want to talk about what this means domestically for President Biden. You've warned that the way that the Biden administration, the president,
notice how she was able just to shrug that off. She doesn't care about anything Pramila Jayapal said. I don't care about those Palestinians being taken out of their homes and being occupied. She don't care. She don't give a fuck. Dana is sitting there trying to collect a check. That's it. She don't care. She don't care. reading notes that were written for her. She didn't write those notes, or reading from a teleprompter. She's not doing any research. Information is handed to her and she reads it. I've toured these studios. I know exactly what goes on. That's it. Information handed to you and they read it. That's all she's doing. But Pramila Jayapal missed an important moment here. Because if Pramila Jayapal had done her research, she would have known that Palestinian women have made those same complaints against IDF soldiers. And she didn't even push back on it. That was a key moment for her to push back. And she pushed back with, let me tell you how life has been for the Palestinian people. No, Pramila, you push back with, actually, Dana, Palestinian women and children have made those same complaints about IDF soldiers. That's how you push back on that.
President himself is handling this war jeopardizes his support among progressives and Muslim American voters, and that they could actually stay home. Do you think that that is, how big of a threat, political threat, is that to President Biden, in particular when it's possible, at this point probable, that Donald Trump would be his opponent? And he's not exactly warm when it comes to Muslims.
Yeah, that's an understatement. Look, I am a supporter of President Biden. I have been out there for the president, and I will continue to be, even though I think that the way that this, the handling of this war started was unfortunately such that it has alienated huge communities. We have to be realistic about that, and we have to do work right now to address that, not just with outreach here, but actually looking at the situation in the Middle East and recognizing that Palestinians deserve the same respect, innocent Palestinians deserve the same respect as innocent Israelis. And we've got to talk about that. We've got to get to that long-term solution. And at the end of the day, the United States has its reputation to think about globally. And if we alienate all of our allies in the Middle East, that is not going to help us ensure that President Biden wins domestically at home.
So I just want to say this: the U.S. reputation globally was not good before this war. But to the rhetoric that Dana spewed about the sexual allegations, this came from Barry Weiss. It says, I saw this beautiful woman with 8 or 10 of fighters beating and assaulting her. She was screaming, "Stop it. I'm going to die anyway from what you are doing. Just kill me." They were laughing. The last one shot her in the head. Savages. Now that comes from this report here, which says that Hamas assaulted and beheaded women at rave massacre, etc. So she shared that. Again, you got to understand who Barry Weiss is. You know, I swear to God, this woman is cringe. Like, she's one of the cringe journalists. But she's doing her role here again, right? To try to get people to be more sympathetic towards the state of Israel. Now, Max Blumenthal, however, responded to Barry Weiss with this: there is no mention of the source of this claim, Yoni Sedan, in any Hebrew or English media prior to December 3rd. 0 Yoni Sedan social media profiles are sharing this story, except to say they're not responsible for it. No individual Hamas assault story has been confirmed, yet we're supposed to believe 10 armed men assaulted a single woman in a chaotic scene, presumably with police and other gunmen firing around them. This is a fabrication designed to justify genocide, and one likely inspired by other lurid fables. So let me post this here because he's sharing this from Yoni, and it was translated here by Google. It turns out that this quote from another Yoni Sedoun in the Times this morning, as someone who witnessed the horrors at the party in Ra, caused a subsequent attack by female investigators from all factions on my Instagram account. Well, it's not me. So you guys see this? You see what's happening here? So Yoni is saying that that's not even him. So you see what's happening here. So that was Max Blumenthal responding to what Barry Weiss said. Again, they're claiming that this happened at the festival. Again, like the UN said, there should be an investigation into this. It is strange, though, that nobody reported this until after December 3rd. So that's the point that Max is making there. And if I was Pramila Jayapal, I think she should have brought that up as well. However, that being said, of all the people to agree with this, Miss Hillary Clinton had the audacity to speak on this. Her of all people. Listen to this.
As you well know, many women and girls were attacked brutally by Hamas on October 7th, and they have testified to the gender-based violence that they both experienced and witnessed. As a global community, we must respond to weaponized sexual violence wherever it happens with absolute condemnation. There can be no justifications and no excuses.
No justifications and no excuses. Bill Clinton was excused. Joe Biden was excused. Of all the people who talk about there can be no justifications when it comes to, obviously, sexual assault accusations, no justifications and no excuses, they got Hillary Clinton's ass to make this video and make this statement. Because Hillary Clinton had no problem making justifications and excuses when her husband, Bill Clinton, was accused of sexual assault when he was governor of Arkansas. Her name was Juanita. In fact, if I remember correctly, Hillary Clinton went on to shame and smear the women. Let her finish.
Rape as a weapon of war is a crime against humanity. Such atrocities have no place in any society or any conflict. It is outrageous that some who claim to stand for justice are closing their eyes and their hearts to the victims of Hamas.
Girl, you talking about yourself. She's talking about herself. How many times did you close your eyes, Hillary? How closed were your eyes that you didn't even see that your own husband was sleeping with a damn intern, okay? And you live in the White House. Other people knew about it. How closed were your eyes? Were your eyes closed or were they open and you chose to ignore it? How closed were your eyes all the different times that your husband was accused of sexual harassment, sexual misconduct, and sexual assault by other women? This was even before he became president, boo. How many times did you close your eyes, Hillary, so that you can fulfill your political ambitions? Closed your eyes when Tara Reid filed accusations against Joe Biden. Your eyes were closed then too. All of a sudden, the justification and the exemptions were okay because it was a member of your party. She got no room to talk. No room to talk. Your husband, who was friends with Jeffrey Epstein, pictures of your husband and Jeffrey Epstein, Bill on the island, still don't want to talk about it. Don't want to release the names because Bill's name might be in that book, right? Get out of here. Of all the people. She's getting roasted in the comments, by the way. If you want to take a look at those. Check that out when you have a chance. We got one more story for you. I'm going to go ahead and go to the comments. JB says, can we talk about the epidemic of sexual assault in the IDF against female Israeli soldiers? That was another story that came up as well, where other soldiers, female soldiers that were part of the IDF, were also making those accusations. Thank you for the super chat, DC. ICC visiting Israel and Ramallah, not Gaza. Hashtag co-opted. Thank you for the super sticker, Nelson. Thank you, Heidi. Hope Biden and Trump lose. And thank you, Lorez. Squad and Shill Hill are clowns. Congrats on 60K, Sab. Thank you so much.